From under the Golden Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capitol Report.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Capitol Report. I'm Bill Laird along with co-host Dave Perry, and we have a great show lined up for you today. We have the pleasure to start off with a good friend of ours, David, a gentleman that's entered the West Virginia legislature all the way back in 1996 and has been a honorable member of the House of Delegates since that time, representing the citizens of the 50th Delegate District, and currently serves as a minority whip in the West Virginia House of Delegates, the Honorable Mike Caputo. And Mike, welcome to the Capitol Report.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Dave, for having me. Two great colleagues that I've had the privilege to serve with for many, many years. Bill, as you know, you and I shared an office together for many years and worked together on a lot of projects. And Dave came along when you went to the Senate, and Dave and I quickly became friends. And two great representatives. I'm nestled here between for the people of their districts. Absolutely. Proud to have served with both of you.
Mike, we talk about the minority whip. Of course, you were the majority whip once upon a time, too. What exactly does a minority whip do?
Well, we try to see where our members are on certain issues, see where the votes line up, whether we're going to take an issue on that the majority is now pursuing or not. And if it becomes controversial, we want to see where our members line up, try to find some type of resolution the best we can to put the citizens of West Virginia first. You don't see a lot of that with this makeup of the legislature, but we always try to put West Virginians first, and we're the voice of the minority, so sometimes we have to take the stand, take a microphone, and tell the other side of the story, as you well know, Dave.
Of course, we had an unusual occurrence the other day in the legislature, talking about protocol and the sensitivity and so forth with respect to reading bills.
Yeah, that's a move that is allowed via the Constitution. A member can ask that bills be read in their entirety. It's you know, you should read the bills on your own. You shouldn't have to have somebody read them for you. I think when that was put in place, it was a way different time, let's say, and let's leave it at that. But it was a move because one member was upset about an incident that happened to him personally, and he decided to do that, which I think was absolutely wrong, and slowed down the train, so to speak, and we all had to sit there and listen to that because one member had a personal beef over something. It was a poor way to handle it, as you can see. He even upset members of his own party by doing that.
Mike, let me ask you again, you know, we're more than halfway through the regular 60-day session. I think going in, the read was this session is likely not to be particularly eventful. You know, the last couple of years with, you know, education reform, very contentious sessions, the ongoing, you know, passage of legislation detrimental to the interests of working families has been the subject of great concern. But, you know, at this stage in the legislature session, would you characterize this as kind of being just a little bit of a status quo session, or are we getting our teeth into some issues and trying to solve some real problems that affect the interests of the citizens of this state?
Well, I haven't seen a whole lot of legislation being pursued by the majority that puts West Virginians first. I've seen a lot of things happening, like the attempt to take spouses off of PEIA, which was a horrible move. We have such a hard time recruiting and retaining good state employees, whether it be teachers, school service personnel, highway workers. The pay isn't the greatest in the world, as you well know, and then you have an attempt by the Republican majority on that committee to strip them of their spouses of PEIA insurance. Thank goodness the Democrats fought a good fight, and we was able to kill that on an 11-11 tie. But as you know, since the Republicans have taken over both houses in 2015, it hasn't been a good day for working families. Elections certainly have consequences. You know, they passed right-to-work legislation, which weakens unions and weakens safety on the workplace. They stripped families of that work in the construction industry of a good wage in regard to repealing the prevailing wage in the state of West Virginia. They've caused 2 teacher strikes where teachers had no alternative but to walk out of their classrooms and come down here and demand what truly should have been handled way before it got to that point. So, you know, we hear a lot about that. They do it in the guise of creating jobs in West Virginia. Well, I submit to you, I haven't seen a lot of companies running to West Virginia to do business after passing those types of legislation. It just drives the standard of living down. I think it's a bad, horrible idea. And I hope that in the next election, there might be some voters' remorse and try to turn the legislature around and get some people in here that care deeply about working family issues.
Well, let me ask you just real quickly a follow-up, particularly with PEIA. When you listen to the needs and demands of teachers and educators during the work stoppages, the real subject of most of their concerns appeared to be, the solvency of PEIA, any type of increase in co-pays and deductibles were really tantamount to salary reductions for education personnel around the state. And again, the pledge was to try to identify a permanent, stable funding solution for PEIA. I think we created a reserve fund and threw a little money in it, but that still is a big issue to rank and file public employees and people that populate our public education system.
Well, public employees and those public employees who are retired, who hasn't had an increase in their pension. If they've been retired 20, 30 years, the pension they received back then is the same pension they're receiving now. So when you increase PEIA premiums to those folks, you really put them in a bad position, and you really take money away from them and no way for them to make it up because they are not working. And those working, you're right, Bill, it is absolutely a pay decrease. It does nothing to retain or recruit good people to the state of West Virginia. And the governor and this current leadership has not even talked about addressing what I believe to be becoming a huge shortfall in PEIA. We've seen reports where, we might survive another year or two with the revenue reserve that we have, but eventually there's going to be $50 to $100 million hole in PEIA, and there's only one way to make that up if you don't dedicate a stream of revenue to that, and that's putting it on the backs of the people, and I'm certainly not going to be supportive of any measures that do that.
And again, $50 or $60 million a year medical inflation doesn't make that any easier.
Doesn't make it any easier, and the longer you wait, as you both know, you both served on Finance Committee long enough, the longer you wait, the more it costs to fix, the harder it is to fix.
Right.
Of course,
we can't continue to kick the can down the road.
Right. We have another measure that would affect revenues, and that's the inventory machine tax. And of course, it's advocated as another tool whereby industry would relocate to West Virginia, much like prevailing wage and right to work.
Yeah, that's over in the Senate right now. As you both know, that's a constitutional amendment which would require 2/3 vote of both houses to get it on the ballot. I have not seen any reason right now for me to vote for that because they've not showed me. First of all, you're taking $100 and some odd million away from the counties that mainly goes toward education. I'm very concerned about that, Dave. As an educator, I know you are too. But they've not shown me any way to replace that tax. And my biggest fear is if we allow that measure to go through, that would be replaced on the backs of working West Virginians via real property taxes. I see no other way to do it. I'm certainly not supportive of that, and that's my biggest fear. So unless I can see a funding source that would replace that tax, then I'm certainly not going to vote to put it on the backs of people. And there again, promises of business coming to the state of West Virginia, again, being paid for by on the backs of working class people.
As well, it affects services in county governments, city governments, and state governments.
Absolutely will. I just don't know how we can do without that right now. I will tell you this, it is a horrible tax. Everybody agrees it's a horrible tax. But until we can find a way to replace it and continue the services we need, particularly in education, there's no way I would ever be able to support that move by the Republican leadership.
And I guess to me it appears the mantra in the last few years have been we need to do everything we can to make West Virginia more business friendly. And again, with that as the underlying justification, where do we want to go as far as eroding the tax base and our ability to continue program services for the benefit of the citizens if that process of trying to accomplish that results in giving things away. So I think the concern would be, once you take that tax away, does it shift then on the backs of other taxpayers in the state of West Virginia? And it has to come from somewhere.
I think it does, and you're absolutely right. We've all been here a long time, and even under Democrat control, everything that was passed that reduced taxes in one area was portrayed as bringing new business into West Virginia. And I'm not going to bore you with a list, but I could give you a dozen items that promised jobs to West Virginia, and to my knowledge, none of them ever came to reality or came to amount to increase our tax base. We've lost we've lost 56,000 people, I think, in the last few years in West Virginia. Population's going down. I'm excited about medical cannabis, but I am also disappointed as to why it's not being put in place and up and running, because I think that will not only bring jobs to West Virginia, it will also bring relief to veterans suffering from PTSD, those suffering from cancer. I think we need to absolutely move on that. And that also, I believe, gives young people reason to stay and come to West Virginia. Why the medical cannabis is being blocked by certain people under this dome is beyond me, and it needs to move forward. That legislation passed 3 years ago is still not up and running, and that's a sad thing. There's a lot of people who need that to get through their struggles.
Absolutely. Mike, unfortunately our time has expired, but again, really wish you continued good success as you fight the good fight, trying to do things that benefit working families throughout the state of West Virginia. So thanks for joining us today on the Capitol Report.
Thanks for having me.
And good luck in that senatorial race, my friend.
I appreciate it, Dave. Thank you, Bill. Thanks for having
buddy.
me. Appreciate it.
Again, Mike Caputo, member of the House of Delegates, representing the 50th Delegate District, joining us here today on the Capitol Report Show. Dave and I are going to go ahead and take a quick break and be right back, so stay with us, everybody.
Stay tuned. The West Virginia Capitol Report will be right back. The West Virginia Capitol Report is brought to you by the AFL-CIO of West Virginia, Cucumber and Company, online at cucumberandcompany.com, and Mark Hunt and Associates, toll free at 800-554-1280. From under the Golden Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capitol Report.
Welcome back to the Capitol Report Show as we continue our discussion here at the state capitol. The legislature currently in regular session, and again, we're very pleased to be joined today, Dave, by a special guest, a good friend of ours, the Honorable Chairperson of the West Virginia State Democrat Party, Belinda Biafore. And Madam Chairman, good to see you and welcome to the Capitol Report Show.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on such an exciting day.
Absolutely. And again, days at the Capitol, a lot of times certain programs and other groups come down, but just something special about 2020 as it relates to honoring really what was a sentinel event and our political landscape throughout this nation, and that happens to be nothing less than allowing women the right to vote. And this is the 100th year anniversary, and lots of good reasons to celebrate and honor that.
It absolutely is. And you know what? We are very fortunate that we've been able to put an event like this together to bring awareness of 100 years. It's a long time coming, but we finally got the right to vote, and the unfortunate part is there's not enough people taking advantage of it.
When do we say the 100th year? Of course, that was March 10th, 1920,
That's
when
correct.
West Virginia passed the 34th Amendment.
34th state.
34th state to
adopt
pass the amendment, yes.
That's right. That's right.
That's important. And again, if we could talk a little bit about the importance of the constitutional right to vote, whether you're a man or a woman. our registration levels in some instances have gone down due to, the purging of voter rolls. Again, some of the demographics are such that young people may not vote at a level that they need to. But from your perspective as state party chairman, what can we continue to try to do to ensure that people exercise that important right?
Well, one thing that I think we need to do is a lot of education. For instance, there's a lot of 17-year-olds out there that don't realize that if they are 18 by November 3rd, the general election date, that they are allowed to participate in the primary. So not a lot of people know that. I think education's important. I think that we need to talk and educate these kids, because when I was growing up, I heard it at the dinner table. We talked politics. A lot of parents aren't talking to their kids today, and they think their votes don't matter, and you only pay attention to old people. And I tried to tell them, the reason they pay attention to seniors is because seniors vote. So there's a lot of things that these kids don't realize that are going to be affected later on in life simply by who their representatives are making the laws down here.
Of course, the contention of the lay of the land over the last few years relevant to government and politics has changed quite a bit, Belinda.
It has changed. It has changed. I'm telling you, I remember the good old days when Bob Dole and Bob Byrd would stand on the floor of the Congress and fight like heck and go out and have a few drinks and dinner and come back the next day with concessions, with a bipartisan effort. And I'm just not seeing that. And it's very frustrating that's happened. And then I think you're seeing a lot of it down here, and it's turning people off. We were talking about other things that need to happen, and I think you need to make sure, when you were talking about the purging, that everybody goes on to their computer or calls their county clerk and says, am I still on the rolls? Can I still vote? Because what happened with some changes in addressing a few years ago, a lot of the rural routes actually got a street route, and so if they sent a piece of mail to your old address and it came back, then they took you out of the system. So I think education is important.
Madam Chairman, again, going back quickly to the importance of suffrage and the extension of the right to vote for women, that almost seems like ancient times. I couldn't imagine any justification, this day and age for any type of exclusion. But not only did women in general, receive the right to vote, but my goodness, when I look at energy within the framework of a political party, a lot of times it's the county women's organizations, the state women's organizations. A lot of the energy that exists within the framework of our political parties appear to be emanating from women who perhaps understand the importance of the political process.
No, you're absolutely right. I'm very proud of our Federation of Democratic Women organization. We are actually a co-sponsor of today's events. There's 30 or 40 so groups that are down here to represent, and there's several programs going on, but the Democratic women played a big role in it. They've had some trainings today, they've talked about suffrage, they've listened to the stories about Susan B. Anthony and the struggle that those women had back in that day, and they didn't let up. They fought and fought and fought until they finally got it, and it made a big difference today.
And today's being capped off with a resolution 42.
Absolutely. We're going to do a resolution on the floor, recognized by both parties, which I think is good, to show bipartisan support and to promote women. That's the name of the game today. So,
Madam Chairman, unfortunately our time is running down, but maybe my last question. To our average viewer who may not necessarily always be actively engaged, some folks say we've become a little bit too tribal in our approach to politics. And, at the end of the day, we're all West Virginians, irrespective of our party affiliations. Sometimes the ability to reach across the aisle and, work in concert with others and trying to promote good things for the benefit of West Virginians. Is that something perhaps at some point in time may be more doable than it seems to be now, because the national discourse seems to kind of promote divisiveness and mean-spiritedness, and sometimes people hear politics discussed and they run the other way. What do we do about it?
I think you're absolutely right. And I tell people all the time, I'm not a national Democrat, I'm a West Virginia Democrat. And there is a difference, because too often state party politics was never driven by national, but with 24/7 media, and I try to tell people it's not news, it's people's opinions, that to turn your TV off and stay away from it. You know, get back to the local grassroots politics. Because actually in West Virginia, you know, that's what it's all about. That's where we need to start, down on the local levels. Make sure you know who your sheriff is, who your county commissioner is, who your legislators down here in Charleston are, because those are going to affect your day-to-day lives a lot quicker than the national level is going to.
So well said. And again, Dave and I want to thank you for stopping by and talking to us today on the Capital Report.
Absolutely, and I appreciate both of you presenting this kind of information and getting the word out to folks.
Okay. Again, joining us here today, Belinda Biafore, the chairman of the State Democrat Party here in the state of West Virginia. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and we'll be right back to the Capital Report. So stay with us, everybody.
Stay tuned. The West Virginia Capital Report will be right back. The West Virginia Capital Report is brought to you by the AFL-CIO of West Virginia, Cucumber and Company, online at cucumberandcompany.com, and Mark Hunt and Associates, toll free at 800-554-1280. From under the Golden Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capital Report.
Welcome back to the Capital Report as we continue our discussion about matters affecting the future of the state of West Virginia. Our broadcast coming to you from the state capitol during the regular 60-day session of the West Virginia legislature. And Dave, we're pleased to be joined by a gentleman we've both known for quite some time, a strong advocate and voice for the interests of education, public education in the state of West Virginia, our good friend Dale Lees with the West Virginia Education Association. And Dale, welcome to the Capital Report show.
Thanks for having me.
You bet.
Again, I started when you were leading off there, I started to think, oh, he's saying I'm old.
Well, we're all getting older.
Yes, we are.
We are. But, you know, we're more than halfway through the regular session. I think, you know, on your election, this session kind of going into it, expectations weren't very high that this would be, you know, as exciting or eventful an session as we've had the last few years. You know, just in general, at this stage in the session, are we indeed beginning to make some inroads on issues affecting the interests of education, public education in the state of West Virginia? You know, those types of things. You know, where are we in this session concerning education issues?
Well, it's been really quiet, and I expected it to be quiet this year with it election year coming up. What is frustrating is we've made some strides the last 2 years, particularly with teacher salary, educator salaries, and getting us competitive. But we're going to fall right back into the same trap that we've fallen in throughout the years, in that you focus on it for a couple of years and then you go back into years where you don't do anything. And that creates the cycles that we can't keep up. We can't be competitive. So if we're really going to address the need for students, and right now there's 540 classrooms in West Virginia without the certified teacher in them. If we're going to address the needs of students, we have to make sure that we're doing everything we can to attract the best and brightest people into education. It's been quiet, but last week they tried to run a PEIA bill that would have taken the spouse off the PEIA, which is a devastating to educators, particularly those who are service professionals who may have a spouse that works a job that pays very little and has no good health insurance. To say to them that you have to either take that health insurance or you pay for it totally yourself, it's just wrong to do to people.
Absolutely. And again, with the just quickly with the salary situation, again, looking at, the competitive salaries paid in surrounding states, no doubt we do lag behind. Is perhaps what you're looking at is maybe a multi-year funding type of proposal where, again, I suppose you have to align the level of your ask with, revenue estimates and what's available for that purpose. Is the answer in multi-year commitments to teacher salaries?
That's really the only way you're going to address the problem and get to where you're competitive. If you recall back in 2014, the passed a pay raise that with the promise that we get beginning salaries to $43,000 by 2019. Now here it is, 2020, and we're not anywhere near the $43,000 beginning salary. But because we've lost those years, we've fallen behind in the rankings, which means our competitive states, our states that we're contiguous with, have become so much more in their pay that it's hard for us to track. When you can drive 30 minutes from about half the West Virginia counties and be in another state that's making anywhere from $3,000 to $20,000 more, you're not going to stay in West Virginia when you have the student loan debts that you have.
Stay tuned. The West Virginia Capital Report will be right back. From under the Golden Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capital Report.
Again, on behalf of my broadcast colleague here, Dave Perry, I'm Bill Laird, thanking you all for tuning us in each week on the West Virginia Capital Report. Have a good week and goodbye, everybody.
This has been the West Virginia Capital Report.